This video, I'm going to show you what toxins do to you and what you can do about it. And this isn't going to be your normal toxin talk where people talk about random juice cleanses or some random toxin that's bad or some just meaningless term. We're going to do a science-based discussion. And what I'm going to do for you is I'm actually going to walk you through a journal article from the Journal of Interdisciplinary Toxicology. And this might sound boring, and it would be normally hard for you to perhaps to understand unless you're an academic, but I'm going to walk you through it and simplify this and share with you exactly what it means to you. And stick with me because you'll learn that virtually every illness is scientifically proven to be caused by toxins. Everything from heart disease, diabetes, neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, these sorts of things. They're all caused by toxins. Why don't you hear more about it? Well, the toxin industry, the petrochemical industry, pretty big industry, so they're not exactly advertising this. And most of the knowledge about toxins that everybody knows about is heavy metals, and certainly they're a problem. But these petrochemical toxins are majorly problematic, and this article will show you why they're problematic and exactly what you can do about them, and what you can also do to remove the heavy metals. So, without any further ado, we'll get into it. So you can find this. I'll post the link, hopefully, in the description below on the YouTube video, of where you can actually read this article online. It's free to read online, but it gets into a lot of really heady and complex terminology. So I'm going to simplify it for you, and trust me, this is fascinating. This is absolutely fascinating. Stick with me through the boring parts, and you'll be really, really glad that you did, because I guarantee you will want to prevent, avoid, or reverse these diseases by avoiding and removing, most importantly, removing these lipophilic toxins, because these toxins are called lipophilic. Lipo means fat, philic means love, so they love to store in the fat tissues. I'm going to show you how a simple B vitamin can actually remove these toxins from your system. Very, very simple. Nobody talks about it yet because who's gonna make any money on vitamin B vitamin? I mean, really. So, but it's well proven in the scientific literature as well. Okay, so let's get into it. So this is titled exposure, and you'll see when it turns to like bluish gray, that's the part that we're talking about. So exposure to lipophilic chemicals as a cause of neurological impairments, neurodevelopmental disorders, and neurodegenerative diseases. So in other words, fat-soluble toxins mess up your brain and cause long-term mental problems and many other horrible things. And they're everywhere in the environment. Okay, so from 1990 to 2010, you know what? Let me make this just a little bit bigger, because I think that would do people on mobile phones will like it to see it a little bit bigger. So there we go. So from 1990 to 2010, mental and behavioral disorders increased by more than 37%. That's just in 2 decades. Almost doubled in 2 decades. That's crazy. Parkinson's disease increased by 75%. This is in 2 decades. Alzheimer's disease doubled. Autism increased by 30%. ADHD increased by 16%. This is insanity. What's going on? The increases in many epidemic and pandemic diseases, including neurological diseases, have been attributed to environmental exposures to exogenous toxic chemicals. That means toxins outside of our body, not toxins that your body makes. So in other words, it's the environmental toxins that are causing these problems. So if you want to avoid these problems, you have to avoid or reduce your exposure to these environmental toxins and detoxify them. It has been previously shown that lipophilic, remember that means fat soluble, and hydrophilic, which means water soluble, chemicals are toxic to humans at concentrations that are far below those known to be toxic for each of the components of such mixtures alone. In other words, 1 plus 1 does not equal 2 here. They have a negative synergistic effect. It's making, instead of just having one bad toxin and then adding another bad toxin, 1 plus 1 equals 2, it could be 1 plus 1 equals 7. So these fat-soluble toxins are making the other toxins more toxic. It has been previously reported that exposures to hydrophilic and lipophilic chemicals, water-soluble and fat-soluble toxins, need not occur simultaneously. So in other words, they can occur sequentially. So in other words, if you're exposed to fat-soluble toxins 10 years ago, they're sitting there in your fat cells and they're getting into your bloodstream slowly, and then you're exposed to a water-soluble toxin like pesticides in your food. Some pesticides like atrazine are fat-soluble, others like Roundup are water-soluble. Then you have that negative synergy effect, provided that the lipophilic species is still retained in the body, which it is because the toxins are stored in the fat cells. Such sequential phenomenon has been demonstrated for the induction of type 2 diabetes and of cardiovascular disease. Wait a minute. So in other words, these two types of categories, broad categories of toxins, when they're mixed together, which everybody is exposed to because they already have a baseline of toxins in their fat cells that have been stored over however many years old you are, and then you're exposed to these water-soluble toxins, and then boom, it induces type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease. Everybody's blaming diet, and certainly that's a component. Nobody's talking about toxins. And again, every single one of these things, this is a scientific paper, so you know what that means. This isn't just something you read on the internet. This is peer-reviewed, and they have links and references to studies proving these facts. So hear that one more time. These toxins induce, so they cause type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease. Cardiovascular disease is one of the biggest killers in the United States. Type 2 diabetes is like one of the top diseases that people have in America today. It's very debilitating. The lipophiles, fat-soluble toxins, associated with the induction of neurological disorders can be long-lived, persistent organic pollutants. Once absorbed, can remain in the body's fat tissue, adipose tissue, for 30 years or more, and can be transferred to the serum, which is the bloodstream. So that means that the toxins that you were exposed to decades ago are affecting you today. So there's not this religious belief that you're forgiven for your sins of the past, where, you know, when you didn't know better, you ate non-organic food. When you didn't know better, you smoked or you drank or you didn't avoid these toxins. You're still being exposed to those. So clean living today doesn't fix the problems of the past. It's like they're still there. You have to get rid of them in the fat cells, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So a couple of these toxins, one is BPA, which many people know about now, and they've eliminated BPA and put in BPS, which is just as bad. It's just a different phenol, but it's bisphenol S instead of bisphenol A, and can remain in the body for days or weeks. The serum concentration of the lower-lived species remain more or less in a steady state due to continuous exposure and absorption. So in other words, we're constantly being exposed to these. So people ask and they say, Brett, wait a minute, don't we have detoxification organs that are designed for this? Well, no, we were never designed to be exposed to petrochemical onslaught of these toxins in the air, in the water, in our food, everywhere. No, we weren't. But they do get some of them out. But the problem is there's more toxins coming in than we're removing. Suggested mechanisms of neurotoxic action for some of these chemicals include oxidative stress, epigenetic effects. So it actually alters your genes, their gene expression, and endocrine hormone disruption. Most women know about what having disturbed hormones feels like. And men with these petrochemicals, they reduce testosterone levels dramatically. means you lack ambition, feel too much stress because of hormone disruption. Yet to date, no mechanism can account for the neurological toxicity of this group of chemicals, which differ widely in structure, chemical properties, and reactivity. So in other words, we don't know why these things mess us up so much because they're all so different. But the one thing they have in common is they're fat soluble. It is reported here that there's a unifying explanation for the induction of neurological diseases by this diverse group of chemicals. So in other words, they think they figured this out. The studies above show that the accumulation of these chemicals in body serum was associated with increase of neurological impairment, neurodevelopmental, and neurodegenerative diseases. All these chemicals are fat soluble and were shown to accumulate in body serum following exposure to them. So these toxins accumulate. Lipophilic chemicals, listen to this. Lipophilic chemicals were found to facilitate the absorption of hydrophilic chemicals across the body's lipid membranes. So in other words, these fat-soluble toxins open up your membranes to suck in these other toxins. That's when people become sensitive to chemicals. They may not even know they're sensitive to chemicals. They just don't feel very good, but they don't know that it's the actual toxin. Some people are very, very aware of it. It's proposed here that the lipophilia, the fat solubleness of these exogenous chemicals, these chemicals outside of us, induce neurological disorders, brain disorders, by permeating the lipophilic membranes, including the blood-brain barrier, thus enabling for toxic hydrophilic species that would otherwise not be absorbed. So in other words, these water-soluble toxins like Roundup can now get in your brain because you've been exposed to these lipophilic toxins, even if you were exposed decades ago. Don't worry, though. I'm going to show you how to get rid of them. Alphabet soup toxins and phthalates have all been shown to penetrate the blood-brain barrier. So every single one of these gets into your brain. Now remember, these are lipophilic toxins. Persistent organic pollutants, persistent aromatic hydrocarbons, can't remember what this one is, bisphenol A, and phthalates have all been shown to penetrate the blood-brain barrier. Well, guess what the brain's made out of? Mostly fat. So do you think those toxins leave once these fat-loving toxins, lipophilic toxins, do you think they leave the brain when they love fat? Not a chance. So they stay in there. That's why neurological impairments associated with lipophilic chemical exposure include central nervous system disorder, cognitive, motor, and sensory, as well as peripheral nervous maladies. Research has shown that neurological impairment prevalence is increased by the exposure to the number of chemicals. So they've shown a direct correlation between chemical exposure and these neurological impairments. So do you ever forget things, have troubles articulating your thoughts, have brain fog, not feel as sharp as you used to? Well, it's the toxins, my friend. BPA, widely used in the manufacture of plastic food container and other applications. Phthalates, widely used as plasticizers for polyvinyl chloride. That's what's in many, many pipes and also in your shower curtain. These are just common things that you're exposed to every day. Low molecular weight, alpha-latic hydrocarbons and aromatic hydrocarbons, that was the term above, and their chlorinated byproducts, which evaporate from gasoline, adhesives, paints, and household products. So if you drive down the road, you're breathing some of these toxins. And if you have paint in your house, you're breathing some of these toxins. That's not hopeless. I have some really good solutions, so don't give up. And polynuclear aromatic hydrocarbons, which come primarily from secondary tobacco smoke inhalations. Well, I would add primary tobacco smoke as well, and fuel combustion. So in other words, these toxins are everywhere. Neurodegenerative developmental diseases. NDDs associated with lipophilic fat-soluble chemical exposure include autism spectrum disorder. What? So autism is a chemical exposure disease. Why has autism gone up so much in recent years? Well, it correlates directly with the level of toxins in our environment. Neurodegenerative diseases associated with lipophilic exposure include Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease. This table below summarizes the findings associated with these neurodegenerative diseases with the lipophilic fat-soluble chemicals identified as established or suspected causative agents of their disease. So check this out. These little dots, so like look at Parkinson's. Every single one of these toxins is associated with Parkinson's. Most of these toxins are associated with autism. It's just incredible. Their toxins are the problem. The lipophiles associated with the induction of neurological disorders can be long-lived, persistent organic pollutants, which can remain in the body's fat cells for up to 30 years or more and be transferred to your serum. So you have to, if you want to maintain optimal health, you absolutely have to 100% get these toxins out of your fat cells. If you don't, you will constantly be poisoned to them. Even if you live on the side of a mountain like I do and eat organic food every day that you cook yourself and exercise every day, it doesn't matter. You have to get the toxins out of your fat cells. And I'll show you how to do it in a minute. The serum concentrations of the lower lived species remain more or less in a steady state due to continuous exposure and absorption that replaces quantities lost via metabolism. In other words, we have more toxins coming in than we have toxins coming out. Mechanisms by which environmental chemicals trigger neurological diseases has been proposed. These include oxidative stress, epigenetic effects, and hormone disruption, as we talked about earlier. Oh my goodness, and check this out. Yet all of them were able to penetrate the blood-brain barrier, which strongly suggests a lipophile dependence mechanism for the induction of CVDs. The concept of lipophilic chemicals serving to assist the penetration of hydrophilic therapeutic drugs through the blood-brain barrier is well established. So in other words, it's well established that fat-soluble toxins open up your blood-brain barrier to all sorts of havoc from other toxins. It has previously been shown that a mixture of toxic chemicals containing at least one lipophilic fat-soluble and one water-soluble agent produce effects not predictable from the known toxicology of the individual species. Effects of these effects include attack on the organs. It attacks your organs? And systems not known to be impacted by the individual species. So in other words, individually, these toxins don't do something, but together they do something that's even worse. That individually, if you took them both separately, they wouldn't do this. But when you put them together, then they do something separately that's very damaging. Low-level toxicity induced by exposures to concentrations far below those known to be toxic by a single chemical in the mixtures and enhanced toxicity to humans. So in other words, even at a, quote, safe level, when you have a safe level of toxin A, a safe level of toxin B, they're no longer safe when they're mixed together. These correlations are presented here between the lipophilic absorption with sequential hydrophilic absorption collaborates well with these findings. So this is just maddening what these toxins are doing to us. And so obviously we can't get rid of all the toxins in our environment, so we have to detoxify them from our bodies. And we have to find a way that's proven. Persistent organic pollutants are long-lived and accumulate in white adipose tissue, which is your fat cells. That's what adipose tissue is, which can pass to the blood and be transported around the body. So in other words, these fat-soluble toxins are constantly circulating in your system. Every time you go to sleep, you're burning fat. Every time you're between meals, you're burning fat, and you're being poisoned by these toxins that are in your fat cells. The bioaccumulation of persistent organic pollutants over time, over many years, accounts for the delayed onset of disease following initial exposure. So in other words, it doesn't do anything today, doesn't do anything tomorrow, doesn't do anything the next day. But over time, it causes all these diseases and all these problems. And it accumulates. So the older you are, every year that clicks by, every day that clicks by, your toxic load increases. All of these chemicals, however, are ubiquitous. So they're everywhere in the environment. They're in the air, the water, the food contaminants, resulting in a fairly continuous absorption and maintenance of steady state concentrations in the blood of those who are continuously exposed. Such a scenario applies well to those who take some pharmaceuticals on a regular basis and produce fairly constant levels of lipophiles in the bloodstream. So in other words, taking drugs makes it even worse. The chemicals described above have one characteristic in common. They're all lipophiles. Now get that, because that's a very, very, very important distinction. They store in the fat cells. They're fat-soluble toxins. Although the exposure of these lipophilic species are much lower than their known toxic levels, they're high enough to provide a vehicle for the sequential absorption of hydrophilic species. So once again, they're saying you have to be super careful to avoid and remove these fat-soluble toxins. Otherwise, they just open you right up to absorb the water-soluble toxins. But the good news is when you get rid of these fat-soluble toxins, then you're essentially developing an immunity to these other water-soluble toxins, which means you can live a more normal life once you've detoxified these fat-soluble toxins, which I promise I will get to very shortly. We suggest that the structure of the lipophile is not the critical point. Rather, it's the lipophilicity and the serum load of the lipophilic species that is the determining factor in the triggering the neurological disease. So in other words, it doesn't matter what type of fat-soluble toxin it is. It's just how much of it you have. Poison is poison in this case. Once a steady state critical dose of lipophile is reached, so in other words, once your bucket of toxins gets full, the body is ripe for sequential attack by hydrophilic species, which are everywhere, with the mixture of lipophilic and hydrophilic species capable to attack at an even low levels of exposure. So in other words, that negative synergy again. Exposure to persistent organic pollutants, hydrocarbons, plastic exudates have been associated with metabolic disease, including type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, and obesity. In other words, they cause diabetes, metabolic syndrome, and they make you fat. They make you fat. Yes. It's not calories. It's not just calories. People say, well, gosh, I don't eat that much, but I'm still fat. Yeah. These toxins are actually, there's a whole category of toxins called obesogens because they make you fat. And many of these obesogens are lipophilic. Exposures to lipophilic chemicals discussed above have been associated with a broad spectrum of cardiovascular disease. These include myocardial infarction, heart attack, atherosclerosis, hardening of the arteries, and hypertension, high blood pressure. These are some of the biggest problems that we have in America today if you look at these disease statistics. And they're caused by what? Oh, lack of exercise and diet. Yeah, that's part of it. But this is a huge, huge part of it. These lipophilic chemicals. Other diseases associated with exposure to lipophilic chemicals include immunological disorders, immune disease, like autoimmune disease. Gee, I wonder why so many people are having these diseases now that were very rare decades ago. Lupus, Hashimoto's, rheumatoid arthritis, all these autoimmune diseases, there's dozens of them, too many to list. They're caused by lipophilic toxins. The onset of, and by the way, there's actually a video on that. It's really interesting. What happens is these toxins get into our cells, and then your body says, well, wait a minute, there's something wrong with the cell, and then your body attacks itself because it's not trying to attack your cells, it's trying to attack the toxins, but it doesn't know the difference. That's why these toxins are the root cause of autoimmune disease. The onset of many different cancers has been associated with exposures to chemicals described here. So in other words, these toxins cause cancer. cancer as well. And there's a lot of papers on that. And we all have heard that this causes cancer, that causes cancer. But what we didn't know is that they store in the fat cells and that we're continuously re-exposed to these cancer-causing toxins. People are routinely exposed to many other lipophilic chemicals that retain in the body serum. So many other that we haven't even talked about yet. These include mycotoxins, mold toxins, produced by mold found in wet environments and contaminated foods. What's also interesting is our exposure to EMFs. EMFs actually cause the mold to release the mycotoxins. The prevalence, and many of those are fat soluble, by the way. The prevalence of neurological diseases discussed here, as well as other diseases, have all increased dramatically in the past half century. For example, the prevalence of bipolar disorder and of schizophrenia has increased in the range of 40% in just 2 decades. The prevalence of Alzheimer's disease is expected to double every 20 years. That's insane. Such an increase can only be explained by environmental consideration, and as it corresponds to the worldwide increase of persistent organic pollutants, plastic additives, other chemicals, fossil fuels, and the environmental pollutants with their use and discharge. So in other words, disease rates of mental diseases and all of these other diseases are skyrocketing because of these pollutants. It has been shown, however, that the toxicity of particles is due to the absorption of persistent hydrocarbons on the solid particles and subsequent partitioning of such particles through the lipophilic membranes. The fine particles serve as a vehicle to deliver these I forget what that one is, aromatic hydrocarbons into the lungs where these compounds are absorbed. So in other words, you're breathing this stuff in, just like cigarette smoking. It's a great way to get it into your system. These toxins render the body susceptible to attack by subsequent exposure to other water-soluble toxins that would not otherwise be absorbed. Did you hear that? Boy, that's a big one. In other words, these water-soluble toxins, they wouldn't be absorbed. They wouldn't be absorbed because the membranes would not have been damaged by the fat-soluble toxin. So they would just pass through your urine, pass through your stool, that'd be it. But instead, these lipophilic chemicals can be persistent organic pollutants that are metabolized or eliminated slowly, BPA, phthalates, persistent organic hydrocarbons, blah, 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 and other lipophilic species that are eliminated from the body more rapidly but are constantly replenished in the body from the polluted air and water. So in other words, these toxins, these fat-soluble toxins, are making us vulnerable to the other toxins. The accumulation, and this is this is the last paragraph. The accumulation of lipophilic, stick with me though, I'm going to tell you how to get rid of these. The accumulation of lipophilic chemicals in the body proceeds until a critical lipophilic load is reached. In other words, your bucket's only so big, at which point the body is vulnerable to attack by low levels of toxic hydrophilic chemicals that would otherwise not be toxic. So it's like you have armor on, and these fat-soluble toxins get rid of your armor and make you vulnerable to everything. Sequential absorption of lipophiles followed by hydrophiles, fat-soluble toxins followed by water-soluble toxins, provides a unified explanation. So in other words, this is the explanation of how low levels of rather different environmental pollutants are responsible for the alarming increase of neurological disease. My goodness. Well, there you have it. These toxins cause diabetes, heart disease, cancer, neurodegenerative disease, every single disease that's prevalent. And this is in a peer-reviewed, published, well-respected scientific journal. So I know that's disturbing. I know that's hard to hear. And you did a great job sticking with me here. So there's good news. There's a magical B vitamin that gets rid of these toxins. And what it does is this B vitamin, this is my Facebook group. I teach you how to do this detox protocol for free because that's my thing. I try to help people. So I discovered this and it made a big difference for me. So I want to share it with you. So the way it works is niacin releases the toxins from your fat cells. Now, you have to do it right. There's some complexity to it. You have to wait a certain number of hours before the niacin releases. Then you have to sweat out the toxins, and you have to take the other synergistic nutrients. So this detox protocol has been around for over 60 years. It's used in drug detox centers all over the world. Experts like Dr. Mercola say it's the best detoxification protocol in the world. Many, many experts recommend it. They use it on the Gulf War veterans. It's been proven in many, many scientific journal articles that you could certainly look at in our files section. We have the links to those in our file section of our group. And what it does, what this detox protocol can do for you is it can get rid of those decades. Remember, it said 30 years of stored toxins. It can get rid of those 30 years of stored toxins, put your armor back on, build up your immunity, prevent Alzheimer's, prevent Parkinson's, prevent diabetes, prevent heart disease, prevent hardening of the arteries, prevent heart attacks, prevent your brain from being deteriorated. And the average IQ increase for people who do this detox protocol is 17 points, 17%, which is 7 points. 17% IQ increase for people that do this detox protocol. That's huge. Why? Because we talked about it earlier. The brain is fat, and these toxins get in the fat cells. So join our group. Everything's free in the group. All the information's free, at least for now. I'm doing my best to keep everything free. I work really hard because I'm very passionate about helping people. So join our group. Now, if you're on YouTube and you say, well, gosh, how do I join your group? Well, if you look in the description below, now I wish I was more savvy like the other YouTubers and I just have the link pop up, but like I'm a health and wellness expert. I'm not a expert yet on how to put these things in YouTube. Maybe I will. Maybe it'll be there by now. But all you have to do is look at the bottom in the description and you'll see it. And all you have to do is type in these letters and this will get you to my group. All you have to do is type in fbl.me/detox. So that's frankbilllarry.me/detox. frankbilllarry.me/detox. And that will get you to our Facebook group. And our Facebook group is going viral. We have almost 12,000 members, and we share with you a free book. It tells you how to do this detox protocol. We have an introduction video that tells you even more about it, and we have lots of resources. So please join our group. And if you don't join our group right now, here's what's going to happen. You might watch another YouTube video and you forget and be like, oh my gosh. And you'll be like, what was that? What's the name of that group that I could change my life and improve my health? You might forget. So I'd highly recommend joining now. Like, you don't want to miss out. And I worked really hard to make this peer-reviewed, published journal article understandable and make this video. So if you could just do me a tiny, tiny favor and just hit that little like button, said you like the video, that would be very helpful. That way more people could see this video. And if you leave a couple positive comments, then even more people will see the video. And share this video with your friends. Like, your friends care about their health, and yet they somehow think that a juice cleanse or colonics is going to do the trick. Well, let me ask you this. Is a juice cleanse or colonics going to remove the toxins from your fat cells? Is herbal tea going to remove toxins from your fat cells? No, it won't. That's why you need to do the Smart Detox protocol, which gets rid of the toxins in your fat cells. They've shown peer-reviewed published journal articles have shown a 40 to 60% reduction in pre and post fat biopsies, which is the gold standard of toxin testing, is toxins are stored in the fat cells. So just doing the protocol once, you can get rid of 40 to 60% of the fat-soluble toxins, and you can do it again, and you can reduce it even more. The bottom line is your mental function will increase, your health will increase. It's absolutely amazing. That's why everyone's doing this detox protocol. That's why everybody's sharing this with their friends, because it's the best detoxification protocol in the world. So join our group today, fbl.me. See the little description below in the description. It says it right there. You have to do it now because otherwise you might forget. Or just save this video. That's another option. You can hit save this video. You can watch it again. Add it to your playlist and watch again. But most importantly, join our Facebook group, fbl.me/detox. Please share this video with your friends. I look forward to seeing you in the group. And if you haven't already liked the video, please like the video. Thank you.